Having 5 bosses down and 25 plus hours in the game so far, I'm going to give you guys 9 tips that I think are going to help your First Berserker Khazan gameplay as you go through the game. What's up? My name is Pastor Gaines. I am a Souls-like and Elden Ring content creator and enjoyer, and I'm going to help you in First Berserker Khazan. This first tip is a beginner tip if you're struggling to get Lacrima or level up quickly. Sell everything for Lacrima. There is an NPC in the crevice named Oksana who will allow you to select all your gear, and yes, there is a ton of gear you're going to not need, and trade it for Lacrima. This allows you to level up a lot quicker and was for sure one of the ways I used to get levels fast early on in First Berserker Khazan. I am currently about 25 hours into the game, and she still has a very good return on trade for Lacrima anytime I need to give her my gear. I also suggest visiting her occasionally to dump out all of your gear for Lacrima after you go through an area, as you will have a ton that you need to get rid of. Now, I would stop doing this method as you start getting into higher level gear, as that is when you can start making builds and you don't want to throw anything away unnecessarily that you will need to make a build. Also, as I said, this is an early game tip, and after you unlock your blacksmith, I would stop doing this because you're gonna need to break down all your gear for blacksmithing parts in order to be able to make some of the cooler sets. Next up, this may be self-explanatory and there aren't a ton of weapons that you can use, but I would choose a weapon class and stick with it. There are a ton of different varieties to play, even as you stick with your one weapon type. But if you constantly keep switching back and forth between which weapon you want to use, you aren't going to have enough skill points to really start doing some of the higher damage combos, or you're going to be too spread out and nothing you have is going to do any damage. I personally have selected the spear because I like the very fast gameplay as well as the fun combinations that it provides, but as I get farther into the game and need to start doing more damage, I may switch over to something like the greatsword, where I can be a little bit slower but pour out an absolute truckload of damage. Each weapon is going to have 5 different skill trees within that weapon type, so there's more than enough variety for you to experiment with the one weapon type rather than switching between the 3. This is just my personal opinion, but as I've been playing and getting deeper and deeper into the skill trees, it just provides a ton of fun when doing all the crazy combos, and combat becomes very addicting. Now, for tip number 3, I'm going to talk about dodging, because typically in Souls-like games, dodging comes with a huge penalty to your stamina. For example, in Lies of P, it is much better to perfect guard than to dodge to the right or left, because your stamina bar is going to take a massive hit and you can only dodge about 3 to 4 times. However, that is not the case in First Berserker Khazan. I actually would encourage you to dodge on top of learning the perfect parry system, as it's going to provide you with some really fun combinations and allow combat to take on a life of its own. In fact, there have been many times in this game where I've dodged instead of using the perfect guard, and it puts me into an entire new combo and I do a ton of damage. Either way, dodging is your friend in First Berserker Khazan, and I think you should be utilizing it all the time in combat. Although the perfect parry is definitely where you're going to get the more bang for your buck, dodging is not as bad as it used to be in other Souls-like games. Next up, for tip number 4, consumables should not be overlooked in First Berserker Khazan. There are consumables you can use to imbue your weapon. There are consumables that are going to give you more health. There are so many different consumables that you can use in First Berserker Khazan that will change the way you play and potentially make boss fights a ton easier. For example, there's throwable items that will leave an area of effect of a certain status element near the monster or boss you're fighting, and if that boss sits near it, it will take a ton of damage. You can also have a ton of different resistances to different things you're going to find in First Berserker Khazan, like plague, water resistance, as well as fire resistance, and there are things like the willpower orb, which for 3 spirit gauge units is going to restore your health by 50%. This can almost double or triple the healing that you have depending on how many willpower orbs that you're carrying, and it can really give you a nice handicap in the game, especially if you run out of healing. Regardless of what consumables you have, everything has a fantastic use in First Berserker Khazan, so if you haven't looked at any of them, I suggest you go through and figure out what consumables you can use that will enhance your gameplay. We have a combat tip here for our next tip, and that is going to be standing behind your enemy is going to allow you to do a ton more damage. Now, especially in boss fights, it can be a little bit difficult to get behind your enemy, but if they get stunned or if you get off a brutal attack, you can actually run behind them and start hitting the boss for exponentially more damage. Not to mention, if you do a brutal attack from behind, it's going to do way more damage than if you did a front-facing attack. Now, there are certain armor sets and items that are going to allow you to do more damage from the front, but typically if you're standing behind your enemy, you are going to do way more damage, killing your enemies faster, making your playthrough First Berserker Khazan a lot easier. Now, for our next tip, I encourage you to explore everything. First Berserker Khazan is a pretty linear game. However, there are a lot of nooks and crannies that you can go find special items and other things to help you on your journey in First Berserker Khazan. First and foremost, they have soul stones you can look out for in any region that you find yourself in, and these soul stones can then be used to unleash power for your companion or to up your own stats. There's also jars you can find scattered all throughout the world that will give you great buffs, and there's a quest line that goes along with those as well. Regardless, you're bound to find some awesome chests with some really great gear in them, or some items that are scattered about First Berserker Khazan's world. Regardless, whatever you do, definitely do a lot of exploring and get everything in the area explored. I've had to go back a few times and grab some items that I have missed that have actually been game-changing, and there's also been times when I've missed out on chests, gone back, and gotten some really good items as well. So make sure you're exploring everything, as you don't want to miss anything that could hinder your playthrough or miss an item that could be used to activate an NPC or continue an NPC's questline. For tip number 7, I want to talk about utilizing the training grounds. I mentioned before that I think you should choose one weapon and stick with it, and the training grounds is an excellent area for you to utilize and figure out which weapon suits your needs the best. It's a lot less rage-inducing when you're in the training grounds trying to figure out what weapon works best for you, the new combinations, all the different moves you have in the move sets, rather than going out into the world where it actually matters when you die, trying to figure out what weapon suits your needs the best and what combinations are best for the engagement that you are in. The training grounds is a ton of fun, and I highly recommend visiting this at least once so you can at least try all the weapons, and this is also going to help you become a better player as you recognize the different combinations that you can use in order to do the most damage. For our 8th tip, don't forget to do the bonus missions for your NPCs. You need to do these bonus missions in order to unlock certain areas and attributes of the game. The biggest example I can think of is doing the side mission for the blacksmith, as that will require you to go in and grab the blacksmith's hammer in order to start crafting gear within the crevice. There are a ton of awesome NPC side quests, and some of them are going to give you some really good items, so you definitely don't want to forget that you can go back to previous areas and do these side missions to get the gear and unlock certain attributes in areas that you wouldn't have previously been able to unlock. Lastly, for tip number 9, if you are stuck in First Berserker Khazan on a boss, this game has something very interesting that other Souls games do not have, or Souls-like games I should say, and that is you can go back through the game and go through every single area again, or go through and refight the bosses that you've already beaten, and they will still give you lacrima and items for defeating those bosses. This can be an excellent way to level up. It can be an even better way to get some really cool sets and pieces of gear. Regardless, going back through the game, honing your skills, fighting previous bosses to gain some levels, and also to make your life easier in First Berserker Khazan is always an option. You don't have to be stuck on this game for a very long time. Go back through, practice, utilize the training grounds we just talked about, and go and kill these other bosses so you can get all the gear and lacrima you need in order to be over leveled if you need to, or just in order to practice in this game. This game can be very unforgiving the later you get into the game with the boss fights that are provided. Needless to say, going back through the game is only going to benefit you, and I highly recommend you do so if you are stuck. So there are some early and mid-game tips for you here in First Berserker Khazan. If you've been playing this game and love it, let me know down in the comments below. Any tips that you guys have that you could share with the community are always welcome, because that's what I want to get here, is a community of people that enjoy talking about Souls-like games. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification on your way out. And until next time, guys, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.